the flag on your dress like a cataract. The dual colors see the truth and then filter it. And now your mind's eye is bruised like a pugilist. You evangelize in line with the saberists, agent.
Hey everyone, welcome to Brave the New World. So, CJ, we talked about the Epstein stuff last week, and I have some different thoughts this week than I did last week, but you said this right before we started the show, it just keeps going. So,
yep.
Is there a place you want to start? Because there's so much to fucking get through and talk about. My mind is kind of racing, honestly.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, and I'm trying to work on, a bunch of other Dangerous History episodes, that have nothing directly to do with Epstein, but I keep getting mentally drawn back to the Epstein thing. And, partly it's because the rabbit hole just keeps going and we're nowhere near the bottom of it, of course. No. We still have millions of documents that haven't been released, and we still have plenty of names that have not been unredacted. So, we still have nowhere near the full picture, let alone, a full picture where people have gone through all the documents and, curated them and really dug through everything there. But it just keeps going. And then also, it just keeps getting darker. In terms of just how horrible some of the things in there are.
Yeah.
And it just keeps getting more infuriating as well, because there's no consequences. There have been some minor consequences to some European leaders. There have been
more in Europe than here.
Yeah, and even there, as far as I know, no one's been arrested or charged. It's more just been
people stepping
a
down from
politician.
things.
Yeah, resigning maybe under pressure, Prince Andrew getting stripped of some of his royal prerogatives and having to move from a mansion into a slightly less fancy mansion or whatever. But in the US, it's not even that. In the US, it's not even BS slap on the wrist. I mean, we had been texting over the past few days, like Howard Lutnick.
Yep.
Not resigning, not being much pressure. I mean, I know Massey and a few other people in Congress are trying to, raise that, but I mean, there's just no consequences. So at the same time, we keep getting more and darker stuff coming out. Nothing happens. Nothing happens in the U.S. and very little happens elsewhere.
Yeah. So it keeps getting darker is a great way to put it. And I'm trying to because almost real time, because every day it's more and more. I mean, Massey just went to the DOJ, I think yesterday, but every day there's more and more. And so I'm just trying to encapsulate how I feel about it. And right before the show, I kind of had this realization, if you were to take my experience that I'm having with this global conspiracy and sort of drill it down and sort of compare it to on the relationship level, it's a little bit easier for me to conceptualize. I've had to deal with, I'm almost done your psychopath episode on Dangerous History. I've had to deal with a number of people who have personality disorders. I would call them narcissist or borderline or whatever. And there was one in particular that came to mind today, where it's this guy I wasn't very close to, and he needed me. I could elevate his status in a certain way. And he was very, he was the kind of guy that would create a lot of enemies because he was out in the public doing stuff. I had to work with him on some things, but we weren't really close. But something came out where he was cheating on his wife, and it was going to get public, and a lot of people were going to see this. And before it really kind of took over, at least my part of Twitter and the internet, he messaged me and gave me this long message, this long text of how, all these enemies are coming after him and the things aren't true, and he wants me to know that he's not like this and blah, 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 all this stuff. And we weren't really close, and so I kind of scanned it, but it was so much, I was like, this is too much. But in order for what he was saying to be true, all these other conspiracies and weirdness would have had to be true. For me to trust him that he didn't do something. So the first time this happened, I was like, whatever, and I didn't care. We weren't that close. But then it happened again, and then I looked a little more closely this time with his entire reasons. Oh, this person's out to get me, and then this person, and they're trying to take away free speech, and and all these powerful people are after me or whatever. And you just get to a point where you're like, no. I gave him the benefit of the doubt the first time. But then when it happens again, you're like, no, for you to be right and for you to be telling me the truth, that means all of this shit over there that you're telling me had to happen, all this conspiracy. So no, what I feel about it now is I am trusting that you're the culprit here. You're the one who did it. That's how I'm feeling on sort of a global level, because you've got people saying, you have people in power saying, no, that didn't happen. Specifically with like the sex trafficking thing, you have Kash Patel a few months ago saying there is no conspiracy, there's no conspirators. I kind of want to believe that it's not as pervasive as it really is, or like the sacrificing things, or drinking kids' blood, or like or the Pizzagate stuff. I kind of want to believe that that's all bullshit, because there's enough of the other stuff that's dark. Like Epstein's probably contributed to millions of people dying just because of his money laundering, weapons, drugs, or whatever. So I can believe all that exists, and I do, but the other stuff is so dark and gross that I just didn't want to. But I'm now at the point where I believe all of that shit is true, and anybody who's telling me it's not has to give me like definitive proof that it's not. I believe the Pizzagate shit. Like all of the references, the coded references in the files that just came out, the grape juice and pizza. No one talks to each other that way. Oh, I'm going to come over for grape juice, for grape drink and pizza. Nobody talks that way. So now I just have to believe that all of the conspiracies are true and everybody else is a fucking lying piece of shit. Last thing I'll say before I shut up again, because I know I ranted a little bit, but like, people pick on Massey a bit in some circles, people who I like too, in some circles, because he's just kind of obstinate and kind of a blocker, but he doesn't really get things done. For anybody to ever give Massey shit on anything ever again, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. He's done more to uncover a vast conspiracy, him and Rokan, of course, than anybody else. It's like he has life privileges, life fucking applause for me for this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat as far as how I've been feeling about this whole thing, and I really hope that Massey has really good security.
Absolutely.
And is really careful about like where he goes, in public and things like this, because, I am a believer that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, not that the official story on Charlie Kirk is not true. And, the most likely culprit to me would be some entity, if not directly part of the Israeli deep state, at least like working at their behest. And, I would be, horribly saddened, but not terribly surprised if Massey, God forbid, got assassinated or had an attempt made on him or something like this, because this is far beyond anything, Charlie Kirk was saying. And some things have come out, that I wasn't aware of because I wasn't really a listener to Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
I've seen some clips and things towards the end of his life where he was actually more, taking a harder line against Israel and the Zionists than I realized.
He was definitely troubled. Yeah. I mean, the Megyn Kelly interview is a pretty clear indication of that. And now we're seeing all the problem with that is like for the non-conspiracy reasons or events is that they're all liars. Josh Hammer's a liar. The guy from the Babylon Bee is a liar. They're all liars. So it makes him being assassinated for a reason seem way more true.
Yeah. And, I put out that episode, I guess, a little over a month ago now.
Yeah.
We Are Ruled by Psychopaths. And the timing was such that I think it was within a day or two of when I first published it, a few million Epstein documents came out and all this crazy stuff started to be discovered. And, I remember tweeting, hey, does anyone want to argue against my thesis that we're ruled by a bunch of psychopaths? Because, like, hell, I'm even surprised at the extent of some of it. And it's like peak Alex Jones, by which I mean Alex Jones like 15 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, like turning the frogs gay is not at all far-fetched. I mean, there's some ridiculous stuff in there, such as that Epstein, I mean, particularly when you talk about like set aside all the pedo stuff and whatever,
right.
But the science type stuff and all the intellectuals and academics and whatever, where
MIT,
where
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. That's interesting. But one that stuck out to me as it kind of humorous, but it shows how much of like sci-fi villain stuff this really is. He was communicating with somebody about the possibility of using like genetic engineering to create pigs that didn't have hooves or that had non-cloven hoofs. That way, the members of the reptilian psychopath class who still want to keep kosher for some reason could actually eat bacon without feeling bad about it. So like, yeah, we're gonna, make some hoofless pigs, so that
cheat God for my religion.
it's bizarre. And there was in, I guess, the extended interview with Steve Bannon, which I've always been suspicious of Steve Bannon for a variety of reasons, but I think it's only like an hour or two of a 12-hour interview or something like this that actually got released to the public. And one thing, I didn't sit and watch the whole thing. If I can find the time to watch as much as I can of what's been released to the Bannon interview, I probably will. But one thing that jumped out to me that I did see that was revealed in that, and there's no reason to doubt it given all that we know, is that Epstein claimed that when he was still very young and still early in his career, he was contacted by none other than David Rockefeller and invited to join the Trilateral Commission.
Yeah.
And it's like all of the stuff that you would get, lumped into the same category as David Icke for saying 10, 15, 20 years ago, all of this stuff and more is coming out. Like, no, actually, the Trilateral Commission is up to something. And, actually, there are these evil supervillain scientists who are trying to do all this bizarre stuff with cloning and genetic engineering and whatever. I mean, it's just insane. And honestly, it's been very difficult for me to not be depressed all the time.
It is depressing to see it.
With all this, because it's even darker than I thought. And I thought it was pretty damn dark.
That's exactly how I feel. I mean, last week when we talked about it, I didn't want people to, the pedophilia stuff and the sex trafficking stuff is so dark and gross. Mm-hmm. Part of me does not want to believe that there are enough people to be able to create a conspiracy at that, enough people with those predilections, with those wants at that level. I know to get to that, to get to the elite status, you're doing deals, whatever. There's probably there's definitely a higher percentage of sociopaths and psychopaths at that level. I get that. But to be a big enough percentage where they're all cabal together and cover for each other is so depressing.
Yeah. One thing that I thought about, and compared to the Epstein stuff, this is relatively small scale and not as horrible, but it's, still has a lot of bad stuff, is the Harvey Weinstein scandal.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
How many people in Hollywood, both in front and behind the cameras, including a lot of executives, clearly knew at least part of the Harvey Weinstein story, and for years and decades kept their mouth shut. And presumably not all of those people engaged in the same sort of activities as he did. Presumably they weren't all sexual predators, but it just shows you how, people will compartmentalize, people will rationalize, people will look the other way when their paycheck depends on them looking the other way.
Tarantino's my favorite, and he knew. Miramax made him. He knew.
Yeah. Yep.
He knew.
Yep.
And then to bring that back to Epstein, it's like anybody after 2008 who still has anything to do with him is completely corrupted. It's like you were corrupted before. If you knew, I could see a situation where early 80s or something, he does a deal for you, put something in place, and maybe you never see him again, you never think about him again. But then later, if you're past 2008, like Lutnick, or some of the people who have come to light this week, if you're past 2008, where he's already been convicted, it was plead down too. I mean, 30-something women came forward, but he already was convicted of having sex with an underage prostitute. That's happened by 2008, and you're still doing business with them. You are a corrupt fuck. I also last week too. I feel a little bad about last week because it's not. It's really just because I don't want people to use something that wasn't true to say none of it's true. So that's really where I was coming from. But I was kind of protecting Robert Kraft a little bit last week. No more, especially after that fucking commercial. I don't know if you watched the Super Bowl, but that fucking commercial he did. Well, I'm Patriots, so have to watch it. But the fucking commercial he did, the anti-Semitism commercial that he did for the Super Bowl, and it's like. You know exactly why that was. He was caught visiting a prostitute, probably set up by Epstein or one of his people. That's that elite class. He knew him, whatever. And so now he's owned. And so, and this commercial that came out was definitely, the subtext was, if you are criticizing Israel, then you are anti-Semitic, right? So that's clearly where this is coming from. So I'm not going to defend Robert Kraft. Go fuck yourself, Robert. Like, you're part of, you knew. Like, you knew. Yeah. This was past 2008. It was 2018 when you were doing that bullshit, and I'm sure it wasn't the first time. You knew. What did you do to stop it? Trump. He may be, so there are definitely parts of this. There's so many documents, and shit's flying all over the place, so it's hard to keep up. But there are definitely some documents that are making it look like Trump said something in 2006 to a sheriff or something like, oh, I'm glad you investigated this guy. He's bad news. But fucking Trump, after 2008, you 100% knew he was bad news if you didn't already. And why did you obstruct this shit from coming out?
Yeah.
Like, we're supposed to believe that you were trying to protect people in 2006? Well, you're president of the United States. What are you doing now? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. And I was just looking at earlier today, one of the, databases that various people and organizations have set up to search through the Epstein files and whatever. And I was looking at one where they ranked like the most commonly mentioned people and places.
It's going to make me mad.
Okay. Yeah, here we go. Number 1 most mentioned person in the Epstein files, not surprisingly, Epstein himself.
Yeah.
Number 2 most commonly mentioned person in those files, Ghislaine Maxwell. Not surprising.
Yep.
Number 3, Donald Trump, by a good margin. Donald Trump is mentioned in those files twice as many times, roughly, as Bill Clinton. So now I'm sure some of those mentions are relatively innocuous things, but even so, the fact that he's mentioned twice as much as Bill Clinton was in just the overall, file tranche that's been released, that says something.
Man.
That says something. I mean, if some, crazy small-scale local pedo criminal, got in trouble and his computer got seized, and my name was the 3rd most mentioned name in all of his, emails and documents and things like that, I sure as hell, would expect that people would be looking at me going, wait, you're best buddies with this horrible predator? And the fact that people, even if they maybe out of fear or whatever don't want to go public in a big way, say, 5-10 years ago, you would think that there would at least be more people who would quietly disassociate from him and stop answering his emails and stop returning his calls. And I was listening to the other day an episode of Provoked.
Yeah.
With Scott Horton and Daryl Cooper.
Yeah.
And Scott brought up, he didn't mention him by name, but I knew who he was talking about, Thaddeus Russell, who got sort of basically blacklisted from the libertarian milieu broadly defined, simply because he was, and I basically agree with I don't, I had him on my podcast one time way back years ago when I'd only been doing Dangerous History for a couple of years or something. Yeah. And we had a, interesting conversation, whatever. But when he started really kind of fixating on the hill we need to die on is drastically lowering age of consent laws. Yep. And Scott pointed out, it wasn't even that there were any accusations that Russell had ever done anything with anyone underage. He wasn't even saying I want to do it myself. He was making a fairly academic argument, but simply the fact that he's oh yeah, we got to lower our age of consent laws drastically. That was enough for most people to pretty quickly be all right, I'm not interested in, having him back on my show again, just because I don't want to be associated with that. So, you compare that relatively minor as far as we know issue, and our people, to their credit, were just we don't want to have anything to do with someone who's really into that stuff. And then contrast it with Epstein's friends and associates who just kind of keep being his buddy long after everybody kind of knows.
It was the same thing with Ian, the guy who was Free Talk Live, who's now in prison, should not be in prison for the Bitcoin stuff. The name escapes me, but New Hampshire guy, Free Talk Live was a kind of I think it was more prominent back in the day for bringing liberty people to New Hampshire, but still awesome, and he should not be in prison. But that's what the Free State Project disassociated themselves from him, because he he was like, that was his topic for a bit, the age of consent thing. And it's like, why? Like, we don't even need to, why don't we just concentrate on the fucking war machine or something? Why don't we just do that instead? But your point is well made. You have the leader of the free world, not just like not wanting to talk about it, actively obstructing justice for victims of the, of Epstein and his co-conspirators. Now that, like, I don't know, it just hits so heavy because when if I like think about my emotional reaction to Bill Clinton versus Donald Trump, like I have an immediate, I'm so grossed out by Bill Clinton. I think he's just a vile creature. Just all the rape stuff, I'm sure, is true. And he's just such a slick bullshit psychopath. Like, I just really, to my core, hate him. I don't have that same initial reaction to Donald Trump because I don't know why either, because he's such a fucking liar. I don't know why, but he's just as bad. He's just as bad, maybe even worse, because he's using the power of the presidency, the executive branch. He did everything in his power to keep this shit from coming out, and it's arguably as bad, if not worse, than we thought.
Yeah, and there are so many other layers to this thing too that it is kind of a flooding the zone sort of a situation where there's just so many directions of nefarious stuff that's been exposed or, strongly hinted at. Another one that I recently, found out, I forget, I think it was through James Corbett, that that there are documents, including some between Epstein and the wonderful Bill Gates, about pandemic preparedness.
Yeah.
And that, it looks like Epstein had at least some degree of peripheral involvement in a lot of the dark stuff that resulted in, number one, the COVID-19 virus getting created and released, and number two, the horrific response to it by almost every government in the world.
Yep. And
that's another thing that, I'm outraged at the horrible sexual abuse, especially of children. But also, my personal and family life, like a lot of people, was severely damaged by the lockdown regime, by the response to this thing that was like slightly worse than the flu when it first came out. And so again, I'm like viscerally angry because I already, wanted Bill Gates and Fauci, if I had my way, to be like marched up to the guillotine for what they did
absolutely
to us, during the COVID years. But now it's like they were colluding, or at the very least communicating with Epstein regarding a lot of that sort of stuff as well. So it's like there's almost not a huge evil thing that has happened in the last couple decades
that he's not a part of.
He's not closely connected to, if not right at the center of in some cases. And I mean, and who knows now, I never believed that he killed himself. But I was always a little bit skeptical of the people who said, well, he didn't even die. They just, smuggled him out.
Yeah.
But now I'm looking at that going, I don't know. And, are they capable of faking someone's death? That's not very hard.
No. Compared
to many of the things we know that the psychopaths who rule us have gotten away with. I mean, they've created false flag events to manipulate us into war that gets millions of people killed. Yeah. So to fake somebody's death, I mean, Epstein was big into cloning. Did they create a clone of him and just kill the clone and then stick that in and have, the autopsy done on that guy? It's not like, nothing is far-fetched. Nothing is beyond the pale. It's almost like we have to like flip our switch from default not believing outlandish things to default, well, unless we can prove it's not true, which is not how epistemology is supposed to work. But at the same time, when this much crazy shit keeps coming out, it's like, all right, now I'm just going to assume the most crazy, dark, insane stuff is true until it's decisively proven not to be.
that's what I was trying to explain, probably not eloquently in the beginning of this fucking show. It's like, now I don't like to be there either. I don't like to be in a place where everything that comes out, I am geared towards believing it, because I think that that's a dangerous place to be in. But that's where I find myself now. I hadn't thought of the clone thing. That's a good one. But here's the thing. Even if you just believe that the cameras were out for some reason for however long it was when he died or was killed, that seems like an impossible coincidence. And now, I just saw this today, but like some of the docs have shown that it seems like the FBI maybe erased those fucking tapes. Like, maybe they did, because there's an FBI agent who knew that if they replaced the hard drive, it would, whatever, everything would get erased. There's something. I just saw it come through today. I don't know all the details on it, but I believe it. I mean, with you got Kash Patel out there months ago saying there's nothing in here. There's no conspiracy. There's no conspirators. Right. It's just Epstein. He's just trafficking children to himself. Like, he's just sending them in the mail to his other properties, and he goes meets them there. That's exactly what he's doing. Yeah, there's no co-conspirators at all. It's just Epstein. So I have to believe that they knew and they fucked with. I think they know who killed. They either know who killed him or they know where he. I think it's likely he was killed. I don't know about that. I think the most likely is he was killed.
Yeah, I'm just agnostic. I don't know. At this point, neither would surprise me.
Neither would surprise me either. That's fucked up. No, but I agree with you on the COVID-19 thing. Like, I saw that's another thing that came out that I saw this week too, and it's like I had it relatively easy because my wife and I lived in a rural place. We had a lot of outside. We had a lot of acreage, and we could be outside. It's not like we were contained. I felt bad. I had friends in LA who were stuck for a while in their apartments, in an apartment building with a bunch of people. And early on, when you thought that like everybody's telling you, if you get it, you're dead, you're fucking dead, and you're trapped in a prison, and you know that the fucking germs can go under doors and shit, and you're just waiting to maybe get it. You're afraid of everybody. I felt terrible for them. My wife and I had it relatively easy compared, but I couldn't go to a family event because I wouldn't take the fucking vaccine. I had an aunt who, very smart lady, would say to me, none of my friends are like you and won't take the COVID vaccine. But so I like, can you just tell me like why? And of course, just like most, maybe I'm not altogether right. Other rational people out there said was like, okay, well, if I knew that it would prevent me from getting it or dying if I get it, if good for me, I'd take it. Or if I knew that it would stop the spread, I might take it for my community. But neither one of those things are true. But anyway, that prevented me from going to family events. So there was some repercussions there. But I know what it did to the world, and I know what it did to the country. It pitted people against each other. The dichotomies on the family level were happening at the community level, at the national level, and then we almost slipped into complete totalitarianism. It was uncomfortably close. If they would have gotten the mandates through that happened to the military on a more national level, if they would have gotten the licensing through all that shit, it would have gotten like maybe no way to push back, sort of dark. I know how bad that was. And fucking Epstein and Gates conspiring. Yeah, he that's the thing. It's like he's almost like the Forrest Gump of international conspiracies and cabals. He just finds himself in all of the nefarious shit that's going on in the world. It's crazy.
Yeah. And he really got plugged into, he was already from very early in his career plugged into, financial fraud and those sorts of things, his first job at Bear Stearns and everything like that. He already, even before that, was kind of plugged into some of that world from his job at the Dalton School, where he was, hired by Bill Barr's father, who was a former intelligence guy, who also wrote a sci-fi book about
amazing author,
molesting kids. But when Epstein really got fully plugged into the covert netherworld was in regard to a lot of the Iran-Contra stuff.
That's right.
And I mean, that's like such an underappreciated, thing today. At the time, I think a lot of people saw the Iran-Contra thing as not that big of a deal. And, as always, the media did everything they could to filter it through a partisan lens. So it's just like, if you liked Ronald Reagan, then you wanted to believe the best about that story. Yep. And if you were a Democrat, you wanted to believe the worst. But it wasn't because you really understood it and it really, grasped the depth of it and all that, but it was just because you wanted to see the Republican president, look bad and get in trouble.
Yes.
But, the Iran-Contra thing was a very bipartisan operation as well. And so much of this is because there were some real, limited, but real reforms made regarding U.S. intelligence in the 70s.
Carter.
Because of the Church Committee, which happened, I guess, 74, something like that.
Yeah.
And there were some attempts to rein them in, and there was some temporary success there. It at least kind of like set them back, 5 to 10 years. And they had to look for new ways to do things. And, if Congress now has at least some oversight of all the stuff the CIA wants to do, very quickly the CIA realized, like, we have to develop a much bigger, because up till then the CIA just sort of got a blank check most of the time.
They did.
To do whatever. And then after the Church Committee revelations and things like this, and passage of a couple laws to try and rein them in, they had to develop these alternate, black market, these truly, off the books, covert netherworld type of things. And Epstein was a major player in that. And it's also, when Bill Clinton, this often gets overlooked, but, when the cocaine was being smuggled into the United States with the help of lots of CIA people, one of the main places was Mena, Arkansas. And it's one of the things that that movie from, like, I don't know, 8-10 years ago, American Made with Tom Cruise, and that movie is a limited hangout. It doesn't give everything, but it surprisingly does, share more than I expected that it would. I was pleasantly surprised, and it does clearly depict in that movie that at one point Barry Seal, got nabbed by, I guess, like state law enforcement or something.
Yeah.
And Governor Bill Clinton specifically, Barry Seal was the CIA connected guy who was kind of running the airport in Mena, Arkansas, smuggling in the coke. And it was Governor Bill Clinton who was protecting him. And then, my belief is that the quid pro quo is that Clinton then, went from being this obscure governor of Arkansas, who no one even heard of outside of Arkansas, to suddenly being the Democratic nominee for president. Whenever that happens, it's a red flag to me that strings are being pulled for this person. This person is being, shoved to the front of the line over people you would expect, like longtime senators and whatever, would get the nomination. And, it's another thing that shows that a lot of the rivalries and animosities between different parties and people are WWF wrestling style, narratives, because, Clinton was making sure the Arkansas branch of the coke smuggling by the CIA was allowed to keep going along. Well, who was really kind of running that whole thing? It was then Vice President George H.W. Bush, who... former head of the CIA, by the way. And so if you look at the 92 election and you think like, oh, Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush, they're enemies, they're rivals, whatever. It's like that's all show, that's all on the stage in the ring when the lights are on. But the reality was they had already collaborated in running this, dark operation. And how long Bill Clinton was plugged into this world, I don't know, but the fact that he was a Rhodes Scholar is a red flag, and the fact that one of his professors was Carroll Quigley, the author of Tragedy and Hope and things like that, is another red flag where I think Clinton was groomed by intelligence very early on. So anyway, off on a bit of a tangent, but it just shows you how this stuff has deep roots and it has long branches.
I wanted to get into the Clintons anyway. So they must have just had something on him young because, he's a serial rapist and known as a party guy. Like, he fucking partied hard. And so I wonder if they just knew, like, he was definitely he's definitely wishy-washy with the moral stuff, and had a lot of demons. So I think maybe he was just a ripe target for that. He's also got a lot of charisma and is very charming. So he knew how to negotiate. Did you just see it when he was a president? I mean, I remember that. I was younger, but I remember that. Super charisma, and he could sort of get his way, get out of stuff. And now that you just say it, he seems like ripe for being onboarded by deep state actors. The other red flag is Hillary as the wife, of course. I mean, she's a fucking she's a beast. But I did want to ask about, so like that is the Clintons want to testify in public now. Do you find that odd? Like, why even do this? They're not trying to achieve anything at this point, are they?
I'm not sure what to make of that. You know, of course, I don't assume that the Clintons, of all people, are going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I mean, you know, oh yeah, if there's one thing we can count on, it's that Bill Clinton would never lie under oath. I mean, come on. But Tim Dillon actually had an interesting take on his most recent episode of his show, where and he's, you know, he's a comedian and he's very funny, but like he really is pretty well read on all these sorts of things, and you know, knows a lot of like the true conspiracy stuff and whatever, is seemingly read all the same books I have on this stuff. And Tim Dillon's take was that he thinks that Hillary Clinton in particular might actually spill some beans that are true, specifically about Donald Trump, if in fact the animosity between them isn't, you know, fake professional wrestling type stuff. Yeah. And he had a whole like funny way of putting it, where it's like, you know, you've worked at a place, you've seen everybody else get promoted ahead of you when it was your turn. You know, talks about how she got, you know, outmaneuvered by Barack Obama when it was supposed to be her turn, and then outmaneuvered by Donald Trump, you know, thanks to the Electoral College when it was supposed to be her turn for real this time. And now she has no chance of ever becoming president, and that's been the like obsession of her life.
So just revenge?
To eventually become president. So yeah, his theory was that she wants to like basically commit Harry Carey, but take Trump with her, you know, just say
I'm for that. If she wants to do that, I'm totally into it, because he'll go nuclear. If that happens, he'll go hard, and fine.
And his take, by the way, also, Tim Dillon's take, which I thought was, you know, might have something to it, was that recent remark, where Trump all of a sudden was like, oh no, I like Bill Clinton. I'm actually disturbed that people are going after Bill Clinton. Tim Dillon's take was that was Trump trying to signal to the Clintons, like, hey, don't spill any beans about me. I'm gonna, you know, stop acting like you're my enemies, and I'm gonna try and steer this thing away from you guys. Just please don't, you know, tell the public what you know about me and my Epstein connections and everything like this.
Insanity. I mean, I hope that they go after each other. That would be amazing entertainment, number one, but number two, yeah, good. Like, go destroy each other. Like, let's do that. Let's just bring it all into the light and just see it. I mean, this is one of those events, I think, that I wonder, because we're on Twitter and we're sort of tapped into these things just kind of in general, I wonder how much it like people who don't do that are aware of this, or are like when the COVID thing happened, we were all in it together. Like, you couldn't escape. No one could escape it. But if you're offline, kind of, if you're not on Twitter maybe, or watching news, you can kind of shield yourself. You don't see how deep and dark it is. I wonder if it gets to that level, though, it might really take over the zeitgeist and maybe get people into panic mode, because people are going to start to see that if it's hard for me to put myself in their shoes because I haven't been there in decades, but like believing that the government was, very corrupt, but also trying to do things for you, to know that no, they're trying to traffic kids and start wars and profit each other. That's kind of it. They're just the mafia, and they just, they want to make money and have power. Maybe suck the blood out of some kids for longevity. Maybe, I don't know, create some pig hooves, as you mentioned before, so we can kind of skirt God's great creatures, whatever it is. I wonder how much of I wonder, I was thinking this earlier too. Our forefathers would have destroyed this government over this. Like, I have no doubt that they would have risen up. And I wonder what type of backlash this would cause if it becomes way more, the zeitgeist sort of becomes way more aware to this than they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have been having a lot of sympathy lately with a lot of the radicals of the French Revolution, really, where like you realize how a population, when they start to get a window into the absolute depravity and abuses of their ruling class, get to a point where they're like ready for blood, where it's like, let's start setting up the guillotine, let's start setting up the gallows, because seemingly, at least at the high levels, seemingly 90%-ish of our political rulers are in some way or another connected to something awful. And, can any of them be trusted? I mean, very few of them can, for sure. I mean, not that every single member of Congress is directly connected to Epstein, of course not. But, it does make you wonder, because Epstein was not the only person who's doing heinous things. We know for a fact other people have done it, and done it on various scales. There was a scandal in Michigan in the 70s about someone who had an island, by the way, in one of the Great Lakes that was a children's like a summer camp for troubled kids, and they're bringing in kids to basically like molest them and photograph them and whatever. And the guy who was running it was some rich dude with a ton of political connections. He's buddies with auto company executives and all this sort of thing. And there's allegations that all these prominent, state politicians and auto executives and whatever were involved in this. And so that shows you, like, it's not even just that it's just Epstein, or even that it's just national. Like, it makes you wonder how many local and regional operations. There's the Franklin scandal run out of the Midwest in the 80s, which, was seemingly another one of these things that was about abducting kids to then use them as sex slaves for like powerful politicians and business interests and things like this. The first kid who ever had his face on a milk carton was actually the kid who was abducted for this pedo ring that became known as the Franklin scandal. There's a documentary that came out years ago that anyone can watch. It's called Who Took Johnny? And it's about this kid. I forget his last name, but Johnny. Like, where did this whole idea of putting missing kids' faces on milk cartons come from? You can't make this up. Literally, the reason that was a thing, and the first kid whose face was on it, was a kid who got abducted by this high-level politically connected pedo ring. So I don't know what the answer even is, even if you could wake up enough people, because like it's not like if we just, vote the Democrats back in, that's going to solve the problem, because a bunch of them are into this stuff too. And then they'll also have like even worse economic policies probably. So there's no, I don't see how there's any way to fix things within the system.
No,
I like the people that do these things are the system. They are the ones who have written all the rules and molded all the institutions, and they control all the institutions of power and information and all these sorts of things. Elon Musk was trying to get himself invited to an Epstein, party. Yeah. So like, who, other than a tiny handful of congressmen who seemingly are not on the take, other than that, like who do you even replace these people with?
I mean, you said before that maybe it's not a majority of Congress that's connected to Epstein, but kind of, because they're all funded by AIPAC. And so now, that was the other thing. So I didn't really want to believe that, I wouldn't have said that it was likely that Epstein was Mossad agent or, operative or something. But then looking at these files and how seemingly supremacist he was, like Jewish supremacist he was, and like all the insults he was kind of throwing out. That was a little shocking to me, and because I really thought, you're an operator at that level. You're dealing with most, foreign intelligence, powerful people, whatever. So yes, Mossad, yes, CIA, yes, but kind of all of them, Saudi Arabia, all of them. That's where he got his he had a passport and fake name and shit from Saudi Arabia. But no, I think actually he was more predominantly doing the bidding of Mossad, and then therefore probably the CIA. Those are probably the top two. So in that regard, if the majority of Congress, 94% of Congress, I think is what we said, is on the take by AIPAC money,
or equivalent,
equivalent money,
groups,
then now I'm going to believe you were connected to, if not Epstein, then his fucking circle. That's I have to believe that at this point.
Mm-hmm. And I think you may as well, actually, since you're not that far away from me. Yeah. Like, we've got our wonderful Congressman Randy Fine.
Randy!
And
what an ass.
Like, I'm just wondering, what skeletons are in that guy's closet.
Oh, yeah.
As far as I know, he hasn't been specifically mentioned in any of the, Epstein documents that have been released so far, but there's also a zillion names redacted. Very often in the most, damning emails is when they'll redact a name or whatever. So, I mean, I never liked Randy Fine, to put it mildly, but now I'm extra suspicious. What horrible, evil stuff is that guy plugged into? Because he is clearly a creep and a psychopath, and a disgusting individual. So,
and how
I would believe almost anything about him. And
then the problem is DeSantis. Obviously, I have mixed feelings about him because he was one of the better governors, one of the best governors, if not top 3 governors during COVID. He was really good on that. So was Sununu in New Hampshire, someone else out west. But when he ran for president, he was so in the bag for Israel. It was shocking. We have a anti-Semitism law in Florida too. What is it? You can't boycott Israel companies. I think that's illegal in Florida. Something like that.
There's an anti-BDS law. So like any institutional investor, if they're invested in something Israeli connected and they switch out of it, I guess they can get in some sort of trouble. Right. And there is some kind of a law on the books, some kind of anti-Semitism.
There is
social media and that sort of stuff.
Well, because
I don't know the details of it, to be honest with you, but I think I remember hearing that didn't DeSantis travel to Israel?
That's exactly right. To get it signed or to sign it. Yep, that's exactly right. So then normally I would expect, because of how he handled COVID, and he seemed, above board on some things, that he would not tolerate someone like Randy Fine around here. But because of how clearly captured he is by the Israel lobby, he was bad on that. He was not of the moment. Trump was good on it. I mean, it doesn't mean he's good now, but with the whole atrocity that's happening and happened and still happening, but not as bad now in Palestine, he was bad. DeSantis was bad on it. So now, of course, he would tolerate someone like Randy Fine here. Such an evil character, that guy, laughing at dead babies. Fuck that guy. He's a horrible, horrible, horrible person.
A monster. He even looks the part.
He does. He's a terrible person. So there was a couple other things I wanted to ask you. Something from before. I don't understand how Epstein was identified. Because when he worked for the Dalton School, he was young. I mean, he was 21, 19 or 20 years old. He was very young, 20, 21, something like that.
Early 20s,
when he was hired. Yeah, when he was, but really young, very close to teenage. Hired at the Dalton School by former CIA agent,
Donald
gross
Barr.
Novelist, Mr. Barr. And so Epstein had no qualifications for that. He didn't have an degree. I actually don't think he made it through college.
He was a college dropout, yeah.
How did he get identified that early on as someone who would be a good operator? And I don't understand how that happened. And then the move after that to Bear Stearns, why would anybody think that he could manage? Now, Bear Stearns, to be fair, wanted him to launder money and other things, but why would anybody think that he was an operator on that level? How is he identified? I've never seen a good answer to that. Have you?
I think that certain people get identified and begin to be groomed. quite young for certain things. I think Bill Clinton got identified probably when he got his Rhodes Scholarship and started to be gradually groomed by the, transatlantic intelligence elite and whatever. Then maybe not even with him fully knowing it for a while. And with Epstein, it seems to me, and we know, by the way, that the CIA and before it even the OSS during World War II would they had like professors at colleges, at elite colleges, who were sort of like recruiters, unofficially, of course,
Interesting.
And when they met a student who seemed to be like really bright, have certain kind of interests, certain kind of skill sets, and who seemed to not have a real strong moral conscience, they would often try and steer that person into going into the OSS or later the CIA. And this is actually depicted, only slightly fictionalized, in the Matt Damon movie The Good Shepherd. It depicts him getting recruited out of Yale. First he gets recruited into Skull and Bones, and then his professor, his like literature professor, kind of like, pulls him aside and gets him into joining the OSS.
Yeah.
And so I think that those sorts of things have been and still are going on. And not even people who are specifically trying to funnel you to like become a CIA employee, but trying to recruit you into that world. And when you look at Donald Barr, right, Bill Barr's father,
Yeah.
clearly he's, a guy who was in intelligence up to his eyeballs and, was connected to a lot of people. And so he's a guy who, he's working at this elite private school, and he sees this young dude come in, and supposedly Epstein got in some kind of trouble. It didn't result in legal trouble, but he got in some kind of trouble for inappropriate relations with female students.
That's right.
And so, Donald Barr, as a guy who, revealed by his novels, clearly had pedo impulses, probably acted on them, but we don't know that for sure, I guess. But, I think these sorts of predatory people, they have like a version of gaydar, where it's like they can recognize other people who are, psychopaths with certain tendencies and attractions and things. I think they can recognize each other pretty quickly. And so I think that Donald Barr is the answer to like how Epstein first got his toe in the water of this stuff, and then was able to use the connections through Barr to get the job at Bear Stearns, and then, was clearly doing fraud that Bear Stearns wanted him to do, but then he got caught, so then they had to let him go even though they didn't really want to. And so, and then the other big thing that gave Epstein a huge boost early on was, of course, Les Wexner, right? This,
That's true. Yep.
Mogul who owns Victoria's Secret and The Limited and all these sorts of things, who then eventually, gave Epstein power of attorney and, gave him one of his, his fancy
like
apartment.
his New York apartment, right? Or New York townhouse or something. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like one of the most expensive, apartments in the entire city of New York. And this business mogul just gives it to this guy.
Yep.
And, how Epstein was able to like get billions of dollars of investor money when he was fresh off being fired from Bear Stearns for, regulatory violations or whatever. It's like, that's not normal. It's not normal for you to get that job without qualifications at Bear Stearns, and it's not normal for, as soon as you get fired for ethics violations or whatever, to have all these billionaires like, please take my money. It's like you have to be willfully blind or really childishly naive to look at all these things and not say it's pretty obvious. What's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, you can give a little bit of the benefit of the doubt when we're talking about the 80s, where there's news sources, but there isn't the internet, and so stuff doesn't travel as well. At a certain level, I'm sure people talk and it travels. But like in the 2000s, like, and especially after 2008, if you're still doing business with this motherfucker, you are corrupt. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter who you are. You should not get to do whatever you're doing anymore. You shouldn't be in a political class. You shouldn't be in a corporate class anymore. If you had any dealings with him at that point, doesn't matter. The excuse of you not knowing is gone, is absolutely gone. I wonder what like, it would just be interesting to know. And maybe someone does know this. I did listen to to Martyr Maid, to Daryl's, he did like a kind of a history of Epstein, which I really appreciated it because it didn't get into the salacious stuff. It just got into his thing, his sort of history and where he came from. That was super helpful. I listened to it probably a year or two ago, but it is interesting to me how he got to the Dalton School, like how he first interacted with Barr, because Barr must have brought him in somehow. So there had to be something like a familiar relationship or something to make that happen. It'd be very interesting to me to know. But from Barr on, it makes complete sense with all of his connections, how it happened. And then Epstein, don't like to give him any credit for anything, but he's an operator. Like he's an operator. So he had natural talents. They're disgusting, gross. He used them for terrible things, of course, but he obviously had talent and made it work from there. Now, the thing is though, he was involved, dead, thank God. He was involved in so much of the dark shit that happened over the last 40 years, but he can't be the only one. Like there someone has to have, and not just regional, like you were talking about before, like this has to be the way the world works. And so who are the Epsteins of today? Is it just people in political is it like the chief of staff now is it people who are actually physically in the government? They feel like they have, there's enough hubris now that they can operate at that level. So you got, people in high levels in the government who've taken over for what Epstein's doing. Like who are the people that are doing it now?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And, I think with Epstein, think about this. If he was not so like flamboyant and almost, like bragging and gaslighting about what he was up to, he might have still been operating, under the radar successfully right now. So my suspicion is that there have been and still are, other people who are doing what he did. Some of them maybe even doing it on a higher level than he was, because he's not at the very top of the power pyramid. And as long, if they either don't have the same, dark predilections as Epstein, or if they do, but they're much more discreet about them, and they don't, intimate or even brag about it. They're not emailing all their friends, bragging about this creepy shit or whatever. And they don't, have the bad luck of having one of their victims go to local law enforcement who wasn't in on this, joke, and eventually arrested him. It's the same thing as there are serial killers whose names we never learn because they never get caught.
Right.
Because they're the most, careful and controlled, but then there are others who get caught because they're flamboyant and they don't really try to hide it that much, and they're arrogant and whatever. And, if John Wayne Gacy had a much more low-key personality and was, a bit more strategic about a few things, he might have never gotten caught.
Yeah.
And I think with Epstein, it's the tip of the iceberg. Because, if someone is set aside all the salacious pedo stuff and whatever, let's say there's someone who doesn't have any of those predilections, kind of has a normal, sex life or whatever, but is a psychopath and is, willing to do all the financial stuff and political stuff Epstein was doing, but just has a very low-key personality, doesn't pal around with celebrities and scientists and intellectuals, doesn't have big parties, is just quietly doing that part of what Epstein was doing. The finances, the intelligence stuff, the politicians, manipulating and connecting people of the power elite. I don't see why that person would ever come to public knowledge, would ever end up on the radar of any law enforcement that wasn't, controlled and, would be prevented from looking further into him. So, I think there's every reason to suspect there are other people who have been and still are doing those things, whose names we may never know.
And to pile on from what you're saying, I mean, it's clear to me that the system is willing to protect these people, like really protect these people. So I think you're right. I think what doomed him was how bombastic he was about it,
Yeah.
how forward he was about his shit. And you're right, an operator who doesn't do that same thing, obviously the system wants to protect you. So, okay, well, I know we need to wrap up because I think you got a place to be here in a few minutes. Any final words on that? I mean, we're still shout out to Ian Carroll. I haven't looked at it yet, but he created some sort of database that's searchable with like AI to help norms like me go through these files in a bit easier. So, and it seems like a lot of people are really trying to do that, but there's just so many files, like this shit's just going to keep coming out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Pam Bondi and a few other people have made various statements on the record to the effect of like, well, if we reveal everything, then people will completely lose faith and our entire system will be overthrown or whatever. And it's like, yeah, well, if that's true, then the stuff really needs to be exposed, and B, the system probably should be overthrown, because we're supposed to just think that, being ruled by a bunch of psychopaths who like to party with Epstein and do all these horrible things, we're supposed to think that that's better than not having those psychopaths ruling us and manipulating the world and controlling everything. And, look at how connected people like Peter Thiel is to Epstein. These are the people that are surveilling all of our activity and want to put in place an even more Big Brother-esque surveillance state than we already have. And like these people are monsters. These people, who would want to be ruled by people like this? I mean, I wouldn't want to be an employee at a McDonald's if I thought my manager was a pedo or whatever like that. And I'm supposed to think it's cool that our presidents and heads of all of our, cabinet departments and all of the biggest corporate people in the world and whatever, that they're all into this stuff. And if I don't pay quite enough on my taxes or whatever, like I'm in deep shit. I get, raked over the coals for it. But these people just do whatever they want and have no consequences. No consequences. And I just don't understand how a normal person who's not a psychopath or, just being bought and paid for or blackmailed into saying what they want could look at any of this stuff and say like, oh yeah, it's just a few bad apples. We just need to vote a few new people in and maybe pass a few extra laws and it's all going to be okay. It's like, no, the system from top to bottom is not what most people think it is. And it is evil. It is like biblically evil. These people are supervillains. It would be hilarious if it was in, like a farcical movie or something like that. You'd be like, oh, isn't this funny that they're saying all of our rulers are these complete monsters? Ha ha ha. It's like, no, this stuff's real. This stuff is real. We're ruled by a bunch of monsters. I don't know how anybody is okay with that who's not one of the monsters.
It's not civilization. Doesn't feel like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. Sorry. I think I'm madder now after the episode than I was before. But anyway, we should call it quits here, but we'll be back with everybody next week. Thanks, CJ. And we'll talk to you all later. See ya.
Yep. Been fun.